Hey fans, Trevor Timmins, Assistant GM for the Montreal Canadiens, here to answer some fan questions regarding the upcoming draft here in Vancouver. First question comes from Brett, and he asks, what happens when there is a tie between two players to be taken for a specific pick? Who gets the tiebreaker vote? Bergevin? The way we do our draft board is a little different than other teams, and I'm not going to go into specifics to give away our secrets, but we line up players with what we term or determine with the similar asset value. So if it comes down to a tie, we will go with the more of a positional need if we see that the asset value is very similar. So there's no tiebreaker. It's a decision made at the draft table in discussion with our general manager, Marc Bergevin. That's a good question. When you pick right at the top of the draft, usually you get to select from players that may contribute to your team immediately. Like last year, Kotkaniemi contributed to our team, the season right after we drafted him. Picking 15th overall, we don't expect this player to play next year, maybe not even the year after. So we're not addressing an immediate need. If we have an immediate need, then Marc Bergevin will go outside the organization looking to make a trade or sign a free agent. The third question comes from L'Aigle Noir, and it is your draft list finalized, or will you be working on it up until Friday? We're never finished with our draft board until we sit down for the start of the draft. We're putting the finishing touches on this week. We've gathered a lot of data since we last met as a scouting staff. And now, since we've assimilated all the information from all the different combines that we've attended, we'll sit down with the scouts and we'll finalize our draft board and then make some final adjustments here over the next couple of days. Theoretically, we'll be all finished tomorrow night, Wednesday, with the final touches. One of the most important pieces of information that we gather is regarding personality. During the season, we send out a personality assessment form to all the prospects that we are keying in on and scouting during the season. We have Dr. Scott, who works with us. He analyzes all the data that we gather from those questionnaires, and he attends the NHL Combine with us and asks specific questions regarding the results that he's gathered and from the information from the personality assessments. We put a lot of stock into that, specifically special areas such as character, competitiveness, confidence, areas like that young players, young prospects need in order to have the will and the drive to put the effort in to get better and to do the work to get better as hockey players. And Habs87 asks, what do you look for in a player before drafting them, and how does it come to the final decision, i.e. hockey smarts? There's a lot of different attributes we look for in prospects, but we're looking for a defining attribute, an attribute that will help the player get to the National Hockey League level and stay there, whether it be hard, heavy shot, hockey sense, speed, effort, things along those lines. We're looking for what we call a dimensional attribute. So those are some of the examples. Obviously, a player that has all those attributes in dimension don't come along very often. You get a guy like Connor McDavid, Sidney Crosby, for example, players like that, answer a lot of those bells. And Parm asks, what insight do you gain from hosting a European Combine that you wouldn't otherwise have at the NHL Combine? There's only about 105 players that are invited to the NHL Combine in Buffalo. Any player that has been invited, even if he doesn't show up, cannot attend another team's own combine. So the players that we invite to our European Combine are European players from any country. Could be, this year we had a Latvian, Russia, Sweden, Finland, Slovakia. Those players were not invited by the NHL to Buffalo, so we bring them in we hold our European Combine in Stockholm. We bring them in to gather the same information that we are given or provided from the NHL Combine in Buffalo. So it's important to get their medical information, their fitness testing scores, and to do a in-person interview. So there's a lot of information that we can gather to help us make decisions for our draft board. And Hunter Bowley asks, is the focus of the draft on left-handed defensemen? That's an interesting and good question because it relates to one of the other questions, are you drafting for immediate need, immediate help? So you may look at our depth chart and say, well, they need a left-hand shot defenseman. Well, if we draft a left shot defenseman, is he going to play next year? Probably not. So we're looking down the road to fill needs. If you look at our depth chart all the way through the organization, the cupboards are getting filled up in all the different positions. You think back to last year's draft and when we drafted Romanov in the second round, who's a left shot defenseman. In all likelihood, he's a player that will probably get to the NHL level before any player that we draft this year in the same position with the same shot. So no, we're not specifically targeting a left shot defenseman. That's a good question if you keyed in on just the playoffs. But I think even if you look across on the other side of the ice and saw the Boston Bruins, they had a variety of size players. I mean, you look at a player like Torrey Krug, he was one of the best players in that Stanley Cup playoff series for the Boston Bruins. Undersized defenseman, but high compete and high skill level. Then you look at on the same team as a Zdeno Chara, like Mutt and Jeff, the size difference. And yes, St. Louis had if you look at them, they have a big defense, which was, in a 7-game series was difficult for Boston to penetrate. But I believe that you need a mix of players. It's just not one type.